Hello, everyone. Good morning and good afternoon. Welcome to another webinar series, Recent Topics for Research in Finance, organized by Center for Fintech and Banking Universitas 11 Maret. My name is Agista Prameswari, moderator on today's webinar. Now has joined with us Dr. Samuel Vigne from Trinity Business School, University of Dublin. His research interests include econometric modeling, international finance, corporate finance, and fiscal policies. He is also editor-in-chief of Finance Research Letters. Hello, Dr. Samuel Vigne.
Hello, and thank you very much for having me.
Okay, how are you today?
Very good, thank you very much.
Thank you for joining with us.
It's nice to see so many people here. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Before we start the course, I would like to inform all of participants after the course delivered by Dr. Vigne, we are open Q&A sessions. You are allowed to asking directly to Dr. Vigne. Please use raise hand features, and we'll ask to the committee to unmute the participant's microphone. Or simply, you can write your question in the chat box with format, your name, underscores, your school, university, or institution you are coming from, underscores questions, and I will help to read the questions for our speakers. So without further ado, I would like to please Dr. Samuel Vigne to deliver the materials. So Dr. Samuel Vigne, the time is yours.
Thank you very, very much. As you said, if there are questions, I'm always happy to take them along, or we can pull them at the end. It's up to you. I guess most questions will probably arise at the end. So I prepared a few slides. Let me share them with you. So share screen. Okay. Now you should be able to see my slides. Everyone is seeing my slides, yeah?
Yes, we are.
Okay, so today I want to talk a bit about publishing hot topics. It's one of the many. The entire idea, and I believe you're familiar with my very good friend and an academic mentor. He was formerly my PhD supervisor many years ago, Professor Brian Lucy, and Professor Lucy and I actually a few years back. So Professor Lucy, as you know, is editor of the International Review of Financial Analysis and the International Review of Economics and Finance, and we had this idea to create a collection of thought from an editorial perspective on very practically how to best get published, because we realized that a lot of the advice that people give you, especially during a PhD journey, would be very theoretical. There would be very good pieces of advice, but there's one major issue in today's environment. It's getting harder and harder and harder to get published. I shouldn't say this, actually, it's getting easier and easier and easier to get published, because we have more and more and more of so-called of all these journals, which would be known as predatory journals. So I guess the idea of getting published, we can also consider SSRN, for example, to be a publication, right? So getting published is easier, but getting published in the traditional outlets, which are recognized and ranked and have an impact factor and are ranked in national rankings, such as the German ranking or American or English ranking or Australian ranking, it's getting harder and harder and harder. So we wanted really to try to pinpoint and address a few myths maybe that people have about publishing, and from our perspective, how to make it simpler. Because the reality is that publishing in such journals is getting harder. For Finance Research Letters, we work on approximately 2,000 submissions a year now, from which we have to select 175. So the rejection rate is really big. And unfortunately, with all these journals, the higher they rise in national rankings, the better the quality of submissions become, and it becomes even harder to basically find an in. Okay. So what I want to do, and we could talk about thousands and thousands and thousands of different topics on publishing, right? So how to find your journal, how to increase your chances of not getting desk rejected. So we had this entire broad collection. But today I want to address one specific myth, and please share questions with me, which is, should I focus on hot topics, or should I focus on traditional ideas? And that's actually a very good question, because before we start, I'd like you all to think of the idea of publishing a hot topic as kind of a risky game where you have more risk, but potentially much more reward, right? If you want to play it safe and take your time, you're probably better off publishing something traditional, some theoretical paper looking at an old known issue, for example, right? So, so what are hot topics and how to deal with it? So, the entire idea, of course, stems from you want to avoid it. It's a purely kind of like game theory idea at the end of the day. What you want is to avoid getting rejected, right? And in your work, it's again a whole different subject on how to try and play the reviewers. There's always a game you can play. There's always a way you can write it that the reviewers will kind of be in favor. But if you would just admit that all reviewers are the same, hot topic or not, there's mathematically just a much higher chance that you will avoid a rejection if you work on a hot topic, because you're one of the first, right? You're one of the few to come in. So you're playing now in a pool which is much, much smaller, okay? A perfect example, of course, of a hot topic is today's pandemic, right? The issue, of course, then, in today's pandemic is the perfect example. It will pass, right? At some point, it will become very, very boring, right? Just like the sovereign debt crisis in 2013, the global financial crisis 2008. Another perfect example is Bitcoin, right? The Bitcoin bubble in 2018 led to Bitcoin becoming a very hot topic. But today, people don't really care anymore about Bitcoin. Right? It's not really looked into. Right? Normal people like you and I, who aren't in any banking institutions, we kind of lost our interest for Bitcoin. Right? It was interesting 2 years ago, but now it isn't. And I'm hoping it's going to be the same with coronavirus. Right? I mean, we all hope that next year we will nearly have forgotten about it and it's gone. Right? So as I said, cryptocurrencies being another very good example. And one thing, unfortunately, that they all have in common, very often when people write about hot topic, for lack of data, and especially for lack of existing literature, people in hot topic, and this is really a mistake to remember not to make, they tend to be very descriptive. And the problem with a descriptive piece of work is that if you are the first one to write it, you might get some citations from it, but it's just very bad for the overall image of the journal you're trying to publish in. Right? So a lot of journals, and FRL is definitely one of them, we're not very keen on descriptive manuscripts. So if you need to start a discussion, you need a very good descriptive piece of work, because then everybody will build up on it, okay? Describing what exactly is going on. And if this is what you're doing, and that's a very good thing to do if you're really one of the first movers, is to have a very descriptive piece, but to underpin it as well with an analytical discussion, okay? So while you work on a descriptive, while you would be working on something descriptive, make sure that you have a specific question you're analyzing at the end. And how to analyze it, if you don't, it's difficult to ask or to set up a hypothesis, for example, now with COVID, because of the uncertainties around it and the fact that it's still ongoing. How to hypothesize it? Well, the easiest solution I find is to hold your descriptive observations against an existing set of theoretical frameworks, okay? So you say, look, we observed this, this, and this, which makes it a unique situation. So we want to know, for example, does this hypothesis, does the efficient market hypothesis still hold? Does this hypothesis still hold? You just test a generally accepted hypothesis and just see, does it hold? Because then you have an analytical contribution, an analytical discussion. You have a theoretical contribution, but your main paper in its form is actually empirical, okay? So looking at the major topics between 2015 and 2020, Tammy, I see that the screen is flickering with questions. Should I look into the questions? Unfortunately, I can't access them. Were there any questions asked already, or? Okay. Okay. I take the questions after. Okay. So looking at the topics between 2015 and 2020. Which topics were the most impactful, or which topic were the hottest, if you want it. It's always a good idea to keep track on it. Unsurprisingly, what you find is that they do move with time, okay? So, I mean, the banks, over the last 10 years, the banks probably had the worst periods of their lives. If you look at share prices, of course, of any major bank, whether it's Deutsche Bank or BNP Paribas, or even English banks like HSBC, the stock prices would they really collapse over the last 10 years, right? So where there's a problem, you will have a proposed solution, right? So a lot is written as well on firms. Corporate social responsibility, definitely a very new hot topic, right? We definitely get a lot there, but we get a lot of stuff which isn't great, because the issue with corporate social responsibility, it has to be linked with subjects which are not fully financed, right? So the idea of cooperation here, which is always a good way to solve dealing with hot topics, cooperating with people in different fields, is definitely one that would make your paper much better. I find it's very much the same as well with chief executive officer or any kind of C-level employees. A lot of research done on this, a very attractive new topic. But I believe it's best if you work with somebody who understands a bit about human psychology, right? From a purely finance perspective, what happens if you describe it from purely finance perspective, you tend to fall into a very descriptive kind of piece of work. If you work with somebody who has ideas and intelligence about human psychology, they really add a lot of value to the subject. Okay, so let's look a bit at COVID. So COVID started, as you know. Apologies, I mentioned COVID and I immediately sneezed. I'm sorry for this. So COVID, as you very well know, started really to affect, I guess, the world, and probably in January, February of this year. And there was immediately a reaction to this. And there's a reaction to all these hot topics always from two sides. From the author side, because they want to place a paper quickly. Because again, the idea here is with relatively low work, you can get a very high outcome because you write a paper quicker than others, and it's very likely to lead to publication, right? And it was definitely the case for Corona, but there's also another motivation of looking at hot topics, and this is definitely coming from the editorial side, with a lot of journals just doing special issues on hot topics, right? So we have, so my journal, for example, Finance Research Letters, definitely had one on Corona. My Lucy's journal as well, the JBF is now doing something on COVID, the Journal of Corporate Finance doing something on COVID, and so on and so on. And this is really the advantage. This is really the advantage of these quick responder journals. By responding very fast, the impact factor is very high, and the impact factor is purely and simply a reflection of how many people actually read inside your work, right? You can game national rankings. But you can't play impact factors, right? I mean, with the sheer magnitude of citations, it's impossible to cheat on your impact factor, right? I mean, unless you have, I don't know, 10 manuscripts and 30 citations that you are pushed for. But for the relatively large finance journals, which have like 2,000-3,000 citations a year, of course, you can't control them, right? It's just way too much. So let's look at a few examples of right now. What I would believe would be still hot topics that are slightly closing. First of all, you have cross-sectional issues, and I'm also giving you papers. I'm also giving you example papers here you can look at. So as you can see, they're all from 2020, but you should have a look at them because they all close the loop really well. They close the loop really well of formerly hot topics, which they're now finally nearly closing with a very good recap paper, right? So another one which is very good is the one on safe haven, right? With the entire discussion, safe haven discussion that started with Bauer and Lucy and Bauer and McDermott 10 years ago, this application of safe havens to different financial aspects. There's also a very good research done on long-term effects, especially during the pandemic, and on cross-asset contagion, where cross-asset contagion, I apologize, was definitely a very growing field in the last years, by just linking the responses of one asset to another. And cryptocurrency has taken a growing place. But my advice would be to be careful now with cryptocurrencies, because I think that this time window, unfortunately, is closed again, right? It's not such a hot topic anymore. The current massive hot topic is corporate social responsibility, and currently as well COVID-19. Right? Okay, so what remains? what is there still? Oh, sorry. What is there still to know? So look up. I'm making publicity for my own journal, but I already got a lot of citations. There's a very good paper by John Goodell, which was published in Finance Research Letters. It should be available for free online anyway, so you can download it from everywhere, because all the COVID-19 related work was made available for free by Elsevier. Another very hot topic to look at, far more difficult for you, is research focus on China, right? It's very difficult to have some research focus on an individual country. And I think a lot of people are biased, and they always think that looking at their own country because they work there is very important. But unfortunately, a lot of people don't care. And it doesn't depend on which country you're in. It's simply the size and the magnitude of the country that matters. The reason we accept a lot of work just done in the United States of America is because they are a major player on the financial markets, right? And it's the same with China, which is a major new player. I get a lot of research of people who look at France, for example. And unfortunately, and it pains me to say it because I am from France, but it doesn't really matter if we know, like on a global scale, what's happening in France in finance. It's interesting, but it's not world breaking. It's not a global audience will not be very interested. So when I say Chinese research, I really unfortunately just mean looking at issues that are currently happening in China. Okay. We have a real drop in commodity markets, which again is a topic I can only recommend, right? Commodities were very hot in 2010 to 2013, and then you see a massive drop in commodity research. And it's slightly picking up again now. And I think the most important question to look at, and there's very little done about this actually, is which commodities become financial commodities, right? So gold is the prime example. It has become a financial commodity many, many years ago, where gold really isn't a production asset anymore, but it's just kind of like an investor's tool, right? An investor asset. But is this the same with other commodities? That's something very interesting to look at. What drives the price of commodities nowadays? Is it really your usual supply and demand, where industry is buying it from supplier, or is there not a massive effect of speculation in it, financial speculation? Like, this is what I mean with financialization of commodities. That's definitely a hot topic. Very few people do something about it because most people aren't really interested in commodities. So a lot of another hot topic is firm level antecedents, and with an emphasis on supply chain and finance. So the borderline between finance and international business. Some hot topics, but not as interesting for me anyway, because you will have to slightly change the audience of your journal, is everything around actuarial sciences, right? So around insurances and things like this. So personal debt deviations to insurances, for example. Loss is done as well, but not a lot of great work, unfortunately. But it's starting. It's the intersection with health and psychology. So everything around household finance, the effect of financial misery on mental health, things like this. That's definitely a very new topic, and indeed a very interesting one. And then finally, nonlinear modeling, right? Which is a hot topic because it's just a new new ways to deal with all questions, right? Okay, and the issue, and now we move on to the next part, I guess, of my discussion. What not to do when you present, when you write about a hot topic. Very often, what we see is just a word salad, as Brian I always call it, with people just writing basically a regular paper on a hot topic to get it out as quickly as possible. What you should really do is, if you want to write on a hot topic, my advice would be keep it very simple. Explain what exactly is going on. Let's all agree on what is going on. Let's all agree on where the problem is. And let's all agree that what you're proposing is therefore a logical solution, right? People who, these hot topic discussions, they need to be kept at a relatively simple level. I mean, econometrics the data cleaning, the analysis of the result has to be at a very high level, as all of your work always is, I'm sure. But the idea and the defense of the idea has to remain at a simple pitch in order to reach a big audience. Because with this hot topic, what you want to do is not reach the same audience of 10 people that you always meet at conferences. You want to reach a much, much bigger audience, right? And therefore also give your name a much bigger brand value, okay? So keep it relatively simple. Okay, so what are the correct techniques? So we see more and more wavelets. I think especially for a few topics that I just mentioned, people immediately think, oh, let's do wavelet analysis. I personally have the feeling that a lot of people like wavelets because the picture looks so cool, right? It looks a bit like an old picture of like a harbor or something, you know, like observations where the boats would be. Like wavelet pictures do look great. I completely agree, but they're not the solution to everything, right? We get every fourth paper now is doing a wavelet analysis. And they do look great, but be careful when to use what methodology. And what I always say, and I definitely write it as well as an editor as my comments, explain to me why you didn't use the simplest test, right? If you look at co-integration, why didn't you work with the Johansen test? Why do you work with a fancy new co-integration test, which was proposed 2 months ago? You know, the best tool is not always the best one for the job, right? I mean, if you live somewhere in the outback in the woods, you're not better off having a brand new Mercedes-Benz limousine. You're probably better off having a 10-year-old Toyota. It will survive much longer in the woods than your new limousine, right? And it's very much the same with econometric tools, right? The newest, shiniest thing is not always the best. And it's something that annoys me personally, because I read this and I think it seems you found the package on R or something and you just thought, oh, brand new configuration, let's apply it. Don't do this. Apply the appropriate one, apply the simplest one. Become fancy if there's an issue and explain why you need it to become fancy. Right? And it's very much the same with wavelets. People just apply them and go, it has loads of colors, it looks great, let's put a wavelet in it. No, just apply the correct tool, right? Bayesian statistics has basically completely disappeared. So everybody's just working with classical statistics anymore. And network analysis are very promising, right? So network analysis, all of these tests, of course, available. I personally work with R, I really like it. And I also teach R to my students. Network analysis are really, really, really good. Why? Because they tap into AI and machine learning, right? So they allow you to show things that so far we weren't simply able to show. Okay. So a few terminologies here that we might want to go over. I would always recommend, and I did this in some of my papers, especially in those that were actually published pretty fast. I worked with people of other disciplines, right? I think it's a really, really, really good approach, right? Now, there's 4 different ways to work with different disciplines, right? So first of all, cross-disciplinary, which is viewing one discipline from the perspective of another, right? So it's like an economist commenting on epidemiology, right? You can work from a multidisciplinary perspective, where people from different disciplines would work together, right? And each kind of helping themselves from the discipline of the other, such as mathematical finance. Interdisciplinary, where you integrate knowledge and methods from different disciplines using a real synthesis approach, like behavioral finance or econophysics. Brian Lucy is an absolute fan of econophysics. I never did a special issue on it, but Brian Lucy would always tell you that's a very hot topic. And then transdisciplinary, where you create a unity of intellectual frameworks beyond the disciplinary perspective, like development economics. Whatever approach you take, it's good because A, you double your audience, but you don't have the probability to be accepted, right? It's more people will be interested in your work, and you will be able to manage to present maybe a more interesting piece of work, right? And again, the thing to keep in mind is what you want is you want to bring the idea that you have across very simply, very clearly, and very attractively. Okay, so however, the danger is that sometimes incoherency is just massive. People don't really know, okay, hold on, is this pitched now at a finance audience or is it pitched at a management audience, right? And it is an aching to my point of being very clear. What are you saying, right? And who exactly will your audience be? If your audience are both people, then the same argument might be presented under two different lights, okay? But be very sure that you're clear in the message you're trying to get across, okay? Okay, so what potentials do we have now for that, right? So just applying what I just said. So a good idea would be to work with public health and medical college to use COVID as a natural experiment in risk aversion with applications towards investment and portfolios, entrepreneurship, and financial management. So this would be one, an application of working with one different discipline. Another idea is to work with spatial geographers and epidemiologists to take tools for contagion and spread into corporate finance and international finance. You will see that there's a lot of really, really, really cool tools to present data, analyze data, and get a message across which other disciplines use, which we never heard about, right? Because we just don't really get exposed to them. Engage with colleagues with experience on long-term longitudinal experience to set up panel tracking financial impacts. Finally, work with logistics and supply chain management colleagues to track financials or track financing, along the supply chain. The risk with the last subject, of course, is you will really pitch your research at international business, right? So a good journal there would be, one that comes to mind immediately for Elsevier would be research in international business and finance, for example, right? They would be very interested. In your fourth question, finance research letters, for example, less so because supply chain is simply not financy enough for FRL. And then finally, work with colleagues in human resources to examine the impact on firms that are more or less capable of looking into looking into a firm's payroll and the way they manage their employees, which is again tapping into this previous idea I had about corporate social responsibility. Okay, so to wrap up a bit. It is difficult, right? It is difficult, but a few practical advices. You have to be fast, okay? And it's always worth double checking. It's always worth double checking with the editor. The easiest thing, of course, when you are doing a new hot topic is to try to go for an existing special issue, right? Because then you know for a fact that this person is very willing to consider your work, right? Because it's a special issue. So be conscious of the benefits of letters journal, for example, because we take very small and short articles and we turn them over very, very fast. Okay. Two manuscripts to look at, I think, because they had massive amounts of downloads, is by Warwick McKibben, the Global Macroeconomic Impacts of COVID-19, 7 Scenarios, available on SSRN, or Feverish Stock Prices Reaction to COVID-19, which had 4,000 downloads as soon as COVID kind of started. Okay, and this is the end of my presentation, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Vigne, for your material. If I can make a little bit brief from your materials about if you want to make a potential paper in COVID-19, you can collab with the public health or maybe medical college when your topics come to COVID-19 as well as the main issue. So you can make a broad finding about how the application of for the society and also for the SME maybe, so forth and so on. And so you can also collab with the epidemiologist to research your paper issue on COVID-19. So it will be happen if you want to make your paper more richer in your paper. So everyone, do you have any questions to our speaker? You can use your raise hand feature in your Zoom. And also, if you want to asking directly to Dr. Vigne, or if you want to write your questions, you can also write your question in the chat box with the format, your name and then underscores your institution coming from, and then underscores questions. So anyone? Hello? Okay, Dr. Vin, what I want to ask you, maybe I want to just okay, now. Okay, well, before I want to ask, yes, we have okay, we have a participant that want to join with us to ask directly to Dr. Vin, Muhammad Asif Khan. So you can ask directly to Dr. Vin, please.
Hello,
Hi, thank you.
well and safe. Sorry to say that I sent 2 papers in FRL for the spatial issue.
Okay, good.
Can you raise your
yeah
voice?
Question is
Yeah.
my question
Okay,
is
good.
you mentioned that the theoretical contribution of the paper, you have to discuss hypothetical the sentences in the short paper. What does that mean? Because it was too short that even we couldn't finish our analysis properly.
Okay, so I think the important thing is also with the ongoing special issue in FRL, and unfortunately I don't remember exactly what your manuscript was, because we already got 500 submissions for the special issues, so I was exposed to a lot of manuscripts. The important thing is always to link it, and you can still do it on a very short paper, to link it to an existing theoretical framework. So to motivate your idea by saying, people believe this, but I'm seeing if this is still true under COVID-19, right? If you don't do this, then unfortunately the paper can become very descriptive, right? And the issue is, I think in the back of your mind, always think of what exactly does it mean, what you're showing, right? And interpret it all the time, right? So say, I received a lot of submissions in the special issue where people said, okay, so this happens, so COVID started and then stock prices decreased. But then when a lot of people died, stock prices increased. Very descriptive. And the reason, without explaining the reason, right? Well, the reason, of course, would be because when people started dying, with the time lag, governments already announced lockdown measures, which was positive, and governments also announced that they would print billions and billions of dollars. So this, what I mean, was always, you have to go the extra step and analyze, explain, right?
The difficult part in a full-length paper, I explained that, but when I converted to 2,500 word, it was difficult to mention that, because the paper was COVID Attention Index.
And so, tell me, I can't exactly remember your paper, but I take it I rejected it.
Capacity theory, attention theory was applied. That's Google search data. I construct an index of COVID Attention Index.
Okay, I think I heard my. Wait, maybe do you want, if you want, you can send me an email. I can look into it again.
Yeah, thank you so much. It would be great.
Well, you have my email address from the rejection letter, then, yeah?
Yeah, it is in front of me.
Okay, good. Okay.
Vigens@tcd.ie.
Yeah, that's me. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Do you have your manuscript number? So it's FRL D20.
D20 00131.
Okay. I'll have a look at it. Yeah, send me an email. I'll have a closer look at it again. So when I have it in front of me, it's going to be easier to discuss it.
Yeah, thank you so much for your consideration.
No problem at all. And I talk to you soon then, yeah?
Yeah, hopefully.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Muhammad Asif Khan. Now we have Mr. Abdul Kadir.
Yes.
Hi.
Hi. Everybody. Thank you for your presentation. So I am Associate Professor at Rabat Business School in Morocco. And my question is simple. It seems that there is a rising interest about cryptocurrency, but specifically gold cryptocurrency in Malaysia. So I want to get your take on this point as a future study about cryptocurrency, gold cryptocurrencies. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much for your question, and thank you very much for attending the talk. Okay, so cryptocurrencies is the perfect, and everything that came after, because from cryptocurrencies, then people looked at coins, and people looked at all the other things. So you had like, you know, initial coins offering was then a big subject, or subcoins are not looking at Bitcoin anymore, but at all these other splits. People looked at the fork split between Bitcoin and Bitcoin Gold. Then, so people looked kind of at everything, and it was super hot, and it was relatively easy to publish, right? And I think this gives people the wrong impression now, which is, well, hold on, this paper, which isn't really good, has 500 sites, right? And of course, as editors, we know this, and we go, the good thing about cryptocurrencies is they tend to get cited often, which is really good for impact factor, right? However, what I will say is, I personally believe the only way to write a good paper nowadays on anything that is related to any type of cryptocurrencies or any type of fintech instrument is to start defining what role does it have in the financial system. So start your arguments with what are cryptocurrencies, right? Some people would argue they're a complete tool of speculation, and you will find some papers arguing that they are. Some other people will argue that, hold on, cryptocurrencies are actually just a regular currency, okay? And then you will name the papers which claim so. And then finally, you will find people who will say, no, cryptocurrencies are a standard investment asset, right? Just a regular investment tool, a regular financial asset like many else. And then I think the most elegant thing to do, because this is the best way to sell your paper, is you say, well, hold on, because however you look at it, whether you think it's an international currency, whether you think it's a speculative asset, which is basically worthless, or if you think it's an investment asset with a proper underlying value, then all three groups need to know this, right? And then you present your specific question by arguing that however you define it, it's important. What happens if you don't do this is that it seems like just another paper on the subject. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's just, then you would read it and you would think, not another crypto paper. Like, we get so many crypto papers. So I think arguing and defending your idea is key, right? Whether you look at cryptocurrencies or gold cryptocurrencies or initial coin offerings, whatever you're looking at, everything in fintech, start by explaining what it is without even giving your opinion, just saying people think it's this or this, and from there then develop and present and defend your idea.
Sorry, just because as many of you know, that Islamic finance is something important in Malaysia, and the idea about gold is related to Islamic finance and commodities. So this aspect, I think, should be explored in terms of, first of all, gold is something hybrid between commodities and tangible assets and currency. So the fact that to link it to the cryptocurrency like coins, but it's something digital. So it's given, I think it's a new aspect added to what you have suggested before. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, it's a very good point. I would be very careful with the argumentation always, because I think that a lot of the value from gold comes from our shared memories, whoever we are on this call, come from our shared memories, which is driven by war with foreign invasion or civil unrest in our own countries. And gold has this unique capacity that if turmoil is terrible, if you have a civil war, or if you are being invaded by a foreign aggressor, gold is the only thing that you can use to basically save your life or leave the country or buy things in the country or buy things on the black market during a war or whatever. The paper money is worthless because your government is non-existent anymore. So it's all little gold coins. This is something that cryptocurrencies will never have, because in a civil war, in a foreign invasion, it's very likely that your iPhones they won't function anymore. Like people, so do you know what I mean? So this is why but this is nearly more personal opinion. I always thought that gold, the value of gold is driven by our memory of war, right? And we always think the day we will have to run away to save our families, we will need little gold coins in order to save our lives, really, right? And we won't need any euros or US dollars; they will be worthless, right? Yes. And unfortunately, also I think cryptocurrencies, right?
Thank you. Yeah, you're right. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Abdul Qadir, for your questions. Okay, we move to the next participant that want to asking directly to Dr. Vigne. Zulkifli Abdul Karim. Hello.
Yes, thank you, Dr.
Okay.
Augusta. Okay,
Yes,
thank you, Dr. Samuel. Very interesting sharing session with us. I have several questions for you. First, about the the team for final research letters. Is that final research letters accept all kind of papers, for example, empirical, theoretical, conceptual, and systematic literature review, for example?
We do. But you have to be careful with empirical papers. They need to. It's sometimes like if something is known for the United States, what's the point of showing it also works in the United Kingdom, for example, right? It's kind of obvious that it will. So empirical papers, very, very careful. Theoretical papers, absolutely. And I guess a good way to solve this is if you have an empirical paper.
Mm-hmm.
You have an empirical paper, show that what you did is important, and then at the end show how it will change the theoretical understanding.
Okay, my second question about the process. How long an average the process when we start submit our paper online until our paper is accepted? So an average, how long?
Okay, well, accepted I can't tell you. It's because it really depends on your paper. The first decision will take a few weeks, right? The first decision is either you get rejected or you get a revised. But then the revision, it depends on the size of the revision. It also depends on how long you take, right? But usually we would go to 2 rounds of reviews, sometimes 3. So usually paper would start with like majors, and then they have minors, and then they would go to an accept. But some papers are in the system for 8-9 months, others for 3-4 months. It depends on how quickly you answer to the comments, I guess.
Okay, last question from me about the word limit, because now final research letters very strict. Word limit cannot exceed 2,600. Is that possible to lose to increase a bit up to 3,000?
Okay, no, so unfortunately we have to stick to the 2,500s.
Yeah.
However, what you can do is you can always work with an online appendix. Right? The online appendix is unlimited. And the second thing is you can put an appendix in the paper itself. I prefer online appendices because then we produce less. But if you want to prove an argument, for example, you just put it in Appendix A at the end of the paper. The paper can't be more than 2,500 words because the entire idea is that people like you and I can read it really quickly. In the morning, we would read 3-4 letters. You know, just it's you want to get your idea out in a concise and very short manner. So I don't want more than 2,500 words. However, the appendix, you can have an appendix where you put much more. And that's fine because people don't have to read the appendix, right? You would explain what is in the appendix in 1 sentence and say for further details, refer to Appendix A. And if you have a massive methodology that you want to present, which is 14 pages long for whatever reason, you just say, you present it super shortly and you say, the mathematical derivation of my methodology is available in an online appendix. And then this online appendix will be in blue and people on the PDF can click on it and it will automatically appear as like a pop-up on Google Chrome on Firefox.
Because not easy to make it short paper. 2,500, so very limited.
Yeah, I know. You're right. It's annoying. It is annoying. You are right. I give you that. But I think the reason I'm so strict about it, it is the driver of the success of finance research letters is because it's short, right? It's because you can get your arguments outside in a short, concise manner. And I always think if you can't manage to present your argument shortly, then there's probably something wrong with it. There's too much kind of like wonky stuff, right? So this is where we have it. And it's really the driver of our impact factor is the fact that it's short, right?
All right, thank you very much.
But work with appendices.
Thank you very much, Mr. Zulkifli Abdul Karim, for your questions. Thank you.
All right, welcome. Thank you to you.
Okay, now we also have questions in our Zoom chat box. I will like to read one by one for you, Dr. Vin. The first questions come from Iftikhar Ahmad from University Malaya. Since pandemic is still ongoing issue, do you think the cross-section studies will produce sufficient reliable estimates that may convince the editors or good journals?
That's a very good point. Yeah, that's an excellent point. I would say yes, it is possible because a few things were already published. I think something to look at. Is not necessarily the impact of COVID-19 on financial markets, because as you say, it's ongoing. But there's a lot of interesting impact. For example, what are the impacts of lockdown measures? Right? The lockdown happened, and the lockdown was then stopped. Right? I mean, it started in March, and it was basically stopped in many countries around June. Right? So this is something on COVID-19 which is of interest today because we still talk a lot about new lockdowns. But it's something where you have a closed window of operations. So this is how I would address it. Another way to address it would be to look at government interventions. How good and how efficient are government interventions, etc. Things that happened already for which you have a closed data sample. And then from a cross-sectional perspective, I think you can do a good piece of work. Now, to your final point, can it convince the editor of good journals? Well, it depends on the editors, but read the call for papers very carefully. Right? The call for papers tells you exactly what they're interested in. So I hope this answers your question.
Okay, thank you so much for this question. So anyone, if you want to ask directly to Dr. Vin, you can use the raise hand features, and then I will ask to the committee to unmute your microphone so you can ask directly to Dr. Vin. Or if you want to write your questions, you can use our chat box in your Zoom meeting. Okay, we move to the next questions from Listiowati from STIA Widya Manggala Semarang. She needs your advice about, according to your opinion, how to find the best novelty in research oriented in the conditions of the COVID-19 in accounting sector. Can I only use different tests or t-tests before and after COVID-19 only, or is there any other way? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I think this question can be broken down. First of all, how can we do it in accounting? Unfortunately, I'm not in accounting, and I was never really interested in accounting. But I think accounting, just like finance or human resource or whatever, I think the best thing is to have a very clear overview of what exactly the existing theories are. Okay, and then or the existing set of agreed on knowledge, and then to see if this knowledge still holds under COVID-19, or if COVID-19 led to the necessity to rethink the existing knowledge in accounting. Can you use t-test before and after COVID-19? Is there any other way? Well, I guess that there's many different ways. Right? So you can also just break your sample into periods, kind of a bit like an estimated consistency test, I guess, or a chow test in effect. Where you would just break your sample at COVID-19, see through an OLS what the relationships are before and what the relationships are after. You can work with a biperon analysis, I guess, to see if there are multiple breakpoints and if one of these breakpoints would be COVID-19. So there's a lot of ways to do so, but I think the best thing is be very clear about the existing knowledge in accounting and try to show that a certain theory doesn't work.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Finn, for your answer. We still have many questions, and I will write one by one. Don't worry, participants. Okay, we move to the questions from Anwar Nazif. In corporate finance and governance research, what are issues that capture your interest as editor?
Corporate finance and so I think what I find very interesting is the effect of corporate governance, right, or corporate social responsibility on the stock price of a company. Is it worth it? Because you could argue over the last decades, we argued that it's not good for investors and for capitalism if people behave socially responsibly, right? What you need to do is to make money. And this might be changing. So I think that this is something very interesting. Does it actually have a positive impact on the stock price that companies behave ethically? Okay. So that's one very good thing to look at. And I think another one would be everything that is green finance. Is it worth it for a company to pay the premium to be green? Yes or no? Does it have a positive effect on stock price? Logically, the answer, of course, would be it shouldn't, because it's more expensive. So higher expenses, less profit, smaller stock price. But the argument, of course, is higher expenses, but maybe more revenue, more profit, because your customers like you more, right? We see this response now from customers who want to only buy products from like green companies. So I think this is a good way to argue. So those would be my two main points of interest as an editor.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Finch. Now we move to the next questions. We have questions from Yi Chia from University Malaysia Sabah. For FRL, is there any benchmark on how many tables of estimation results should be tabulated? Is it 2 or 3 tables are enough? Thank you.
I think for 2,500 words, yeah, 2-3 tables would seem probably fine. Yeah. There's no minimum or maximum amount of tables you can put in, but 2-3 tables seems good. Yeah. For such short paper.
Okay. So I think it will be the last questions for Dr. Finn before we close all of the our webinar for today. From Andre Santoso, I want to ask about, you mentioned that researchers should consider the simplest type of testing method or to analyze research data, but sometimes we were asked to use the newest type of analyze method. My question is, when do we should have to use each of these type of analyze, and how do we determine which analysis method will be the best for our research?
Okay, that's a very good question. I'm not exactly sure who asked you to use the newest type of analysis. I guess it's the reviewers sometimes. Sometimes reviewers, and you're right there, sometimes reviewers tend to be pedantic and say, oh, you use this test, but there's this brand new test. The problem I see is there's a reason this test was invented and published, right? And sometimes, let's say, it's optimal for small sample and heteroscedasticity. Imagine you have a large sample and homoscedasticity. Why do you use this test? It's not the right test for it. It's not the right tool, right? And I just very often see this, and this leads to great frustration for me. Just people just use the most modern test, even though it's not good. So the only way to do so, read exactly why this test was proposed, and read whether or not it makes sense to your data. And then in your methodology section, explain you work with this test because you have a large sample, homoscedasticity, no autocorrelation, so this is the test to use, right? And you can even say, we are aware of this, and this procedure, but this is to use under autocorrelation, this is to use with heteroscedasticity, and this is to use for a small sample. None of these things apply to us. This is why these tests, even though they're more modern, are not relevant to us. I hope this answers the question. Yeah?
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Finn, for your time. So for everyone, because of the limitation of the time, we should have to end this webinar sessions. For the participants, you can see the attendance list, link of the attendance list that we have shared in the Zoom chat box from our committee, so you can fill the list that we have shared. Okay, so thank you so much, Dr. Finn, for joining with us today. So we hope that after the pandemic over, we can invite you to come to Solo and see you in person.
I would be very glad, yeah, and I would be glad to meet as many of you face to face, and then we can continue the discussions. Thank you for everything.
Okay, so thank you so much. Before we end this webinar session, please give us your closing statement for us.
Sorry, what? You want me to do what?
Can you give us your closing statements?
My closing statement, sorry. Okay, so my closing statement, I guess, thank you very much for having me, first of all. I think my closing statement is really, when you look at a hot topic, and I present a few hot topics today, and just always more and more coming, adding to the list, some leaving from the list, you have to be quick, but make sure, don't fall in the trap that when you're quick to be too descriptive. Be quick, but still propose an analytical discussion, link it to an existing set of knowledge and say, look, this hot topic, this current situation might actually prove that this theory doesn't work actually. So don't be too descriptive.
Okay, thank you so much. So everyone, this is the end of our webinar session with Dr. Samuel Vigne from University of Dublin. So I hope everyone is safe. Stay safe, everyone, and also see you in the next event from Center for Fintech and Banking Universitas 11 Maret. See you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Dr. Vigne. Thank you very much. See you
Bye-bye.
in the next session. Thank you. Ah, yeah.
Thank you.